The morning rush at the Golden Spoon Cafe was the kind of chaos that only city life could create. Coffee machines hissing, plates clattering, conversations overlapping like crashing waves. The air was thick with the aroma of roasted beans, buttered toast, and the faint tension of people running late to important places. Amara Williams, a 24-year-old waitress with tired eyes and a warm smile, weaved through the tables like a dancer in a crowded ballet. Balancing 3 plates on one arm, she called out orders, refilled mugs, and greeted every customer with a voice that never lost its kindness, even when her feet begged her to stop. Amara had dreams, big ones. She was studying part-time to become a nurse, hoping one day to work in a hospital, helping those in pain. But until that day came, she worked double shifts at the cafe to pay her tuition and help her mother back home. Life wasn't easy, but she believed that kindness, even in small doses, so could change the world. That belief was about to be tested in ways she never imagined. It was mid-morning when the doorbell jingled, a sound Amara had heard 1,000 times. But this time, it brought silence. Every head in the cafe turned as a man in an expensive charcoal suit entered, his presence commanding and cold. Behind him was a little boy about 8 years old, clinging to his father's hand but walking a step too slow. The man was Charles Whitmore, one of the wealthiest and most powerful businessmen in the city. Everyone knew his face. His company owned half the buildings downtown. People said he was a genius. Others said he was ruthless, but no one ever said he was kind. His appearance at the humble cafe sent whispers fluttering across the room. Charles didn't notice. He was glued to his phone, voice clipped and sharp as he barked instructions into his Bluetooth headset. "Tell the board meeting to wait. I'll be there when I'm ready," he snapped, not even glancing at the waitress who approached his table. Amara smiled politely, though she could feel the weight of his authority pressing down like a storm. "Good morning, sir. What can I get you today?" "Coffee," he muttered without looking up. "Black, and whatever he wants." He gestured vaguely toward his son, who sat quietly across from him. Amara crouched down beside the boy to meet his eyes. "Hi there, sweetheart. What's your name?" He hesitated. "Ethan," he whispered. "Well, Ethan," she said softly, "what would you like to eat?" The boy's lips trembled into a small smile. "Maybe pancakes?" "Coming right up." She winked and walked away, but something about the boy bothered her. His skin was unusually pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he held his cup of water. His breathing was shallow, almost labored. Amara had seen many customers in her years at the cafe, but Ethan's face, those unfocused eyes and the way he rubbed at his chest, triggered something deep inside her. A faint alarm bell ringing in her mind. She set the plates on the counter and called to her co-worker, "Liam, can you take Table 5's order for a sec? I need to grab some water for the little boy." When she returned, she noticed Charles hadn't looked at Ethan once. He was still scrolling through emails, oblivious to his son's quiet discomfort. Amara leaned down. "Here you go, sweetheart." Ethan smiled faintly and tried to take a sip, but his hands trembled so much that the glass clinked against his teeth. "Oh, easy there," she said gently, helping him hold it steady. As she did, she noticed something that made her chest tighten. His lips had a bluish tint. His forehead glistened with cold sweat, even though the cafe was warm. "Sir," Amara said softly, glancing at Charles, "I think your son might not be feeling well." Charles didn't look up. "He's fine. He's just tired. We had a late night." Amara frowned. "I don't think it's just that, sir. He seems—" "Miss," he interrupted sharply, finally lifting his gaze, "please just bring the food. I don't need medical advice from a waitress." The words hit her like a slap. The customers nearby went quiet, pretending not to listen. Amara bit her lip, nodded, and walked away, but she couldn't stop glancing back. Something about Ethan's breathing was wrong. Too shallow, too weak. She thought of her younger brother, Jordan, who had once collapsed at home after a sudden allergic reaction to peanuts. She remembered the same look, the panic in his eyes, the struggle for air. That memory was enough to make her heart race. When she turned again to check on the boy, her stomach dropped. Ethan was leaning forward now, his little hands clutching his chest. His breathing came out in rasps, his face paling further. And his father, still on his phone, didn't even see it. Amara's pulse quickened. Something deep inside told her she couldn't ignore this. She had no medical badge, no authority, but she had instincts. And she had heart. Without realizing it, she had already started moving toward the boy, because sometimes, in the middle of an ordinary morning, a single act of courage can rewrite everything. Amara couldn't focus on anything else. Her hands moved automatically, pouring coffee, serving plates, but her eyes kept returning to that table by the window. To Ethan, something was wrong. Terribly wrong. He sat slumped against the back of his chair, his small fingers gripping the edge of the table for balance. His pancake lay untouched, the syrup slowly dripping down the plate. He was sweating despite the cafe's air conditioning, and when he tried to lift his fork, it trembled as if it weighed 100 pounds. Amara's chest tightened. Her instincts screamed louder than reason. She walked closer, pretending to wipe a nearby table, but her attention was fixed on the boy's breathing. It was shallow, uneven. He was struggling for air, his lips now a deeper shade of blue. "Sir," she said again, gently but urgently, "I really think your son doesn't look well." Charles Whitmore didn't even glance up from his phone. "He's fine," he muttered. "He was up late last night." "He's just tired." Amara's heart pounded. "It doesn't look like tiredness, sir." His color, his lips. He exhaled loudly, clearly irritated. "Please, miss, I'm in the middle of something important. Just bring the check when we're done." She stared at him, disbelief flooding her chest. Something important? His son was right there, fading before his eyes, and he couldn't even spare a glance. Still, she tried to stay calm. She bent down next to Ethan, lowering her voice so she wouldn't embarrass him. "Hey, sweetheart. You okay?" Ethan's eyes met hers. They were glassy, frightened. "My chest hurts," he whispered weakly. That was all she needed to hear. "Okay, don't worry," Amara said softly, her tone steady though her hands trembled. "You're going to be okay." She turned toward Charles again. "Sir, he needs medical help now." Charles's head snapped up this time, his expression sharp. "Miss, that's enough. You are a waitress, not a doctor. Stop creating drama and let me handle my son." The words cut like a knife. A few customers turned to look. The cafe fell quiet. Amara swallowed hard, her pride bruised, but her compassion stronger. "With all due respect, sir, I think he's having an allergic reaction or something serious. Please just look at him." Charles sighed, exasperated, and finally turned to his son. "Ethan?" But the boy's reply came out as a faint gasp. He clutched his chest again and wheezed, his face contorting in pain. Amara's instincts took over completely. "He's going into distress," she cried, rushing around the table. "Somebody call 911. Charles froze, his phone falling from his hand as reality hit him like a thunderclap. "Ethan!" he shouted, kneeling beside his son. "Ethan, talk to me." The boy's small body began trembling uncontrollably, his eyes rolling back. Amara was already at his side, her voice urgent and firm. "Sir, lay him flat on the ground. Hurry!" The cafe erupted into chaos. Someone screamed. Another customer rushed to call emergency services. Amara focused on the boy's breathing. It was ragged, erratic, like he was gasping through a straw. "Stay with me, Ethan," she whispered, brushing his hair back. "You're okay, I promise. You're okay." Charles's face was pale, his voice cracking. What's happening to him? "Oh God, what's happening?" Amara looked up at him, her eyes fierce. "It looks like a severe allergic reaction. Did he eat something new today?" He shook his head helplessly. I don't know." "He had orange juice this morning." "Orange juice?" she repeated quickly. "Does he have a citrus allergy?" Charles blinked, confused. I'm not sure. His mother usually keeps track." Amara didn't wait. She knew the signs. Her brother's first allergic reaction had looked just like this. She remembered how terrifying it had been, how seconds had felt like hours. She grabbed a napkin and wiped Ethan's mouth as foam began to form near his lips. "Sir, if you have an EpiPen or any kind of medication, get it now." Charles searched his pockets in panic. I didn't bring anything." "Then don't just stand there," Amara shouted. "Call an ambulance now." He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he dropped it twice. He had built skyscrapers, run billion-dollar companies, but now he couldn't even dial 3 numbers. "Wevan," he finally managed to stammer. "My son, he's not breathing right." As he spoke to the operator, Amara held Ethan's tiny hand, her heart aching. "Come on, baby," she whispered. Stay with me. You're strong. Just breathe for me." Her voice was steady, her touch gentle, though her mind raced in panic. She could feel the boy's pulse weakening under her fingertips. She looked up at Charles, who was now trembling. The arrogance was gone. All that remained was fear. A father watching his child slip away, and as Amara pressed a cold cloth to Ethan's forehead, her eyes burned with tears. She didn't care that she might lose her job. She didn't care that she had shouted at a billionaire. All she cared about was saving that little boy. Because sometimes, when the world turns its back, one kind heart is all it takes to make a miracle happen. And in that crowded cafe, surrounded by strangers and panic, Amara's heart refused to ignore what everyone else chose not to see. The cafe had fallen into an eerie silence. All the sounds that had once filled the room, the clinking cups, the laughter, the soft jazz playing in the background, vanished into stillness. Everyone's eyes were on table 5. Amara knelt beside little Ethan, her heart hammering in her chest as she tried to steady her trembling hands. His breaths came in short, ragged gasps, his chest rising unevenly like he was fighting invisible hands squeezing his lungs. "Stay with me, sweetheart," she said softly. "Look at me, okay? You're safe. Help is on the way." Charles hovered beside her, his face drained of color, his voice shaking with disbelief. He was fine this morning. He was fine. But before he could finish, Ethan's small hand fell from the table and hit the floor with a dull thud. His head tilted back. His body went still. "Ethan!" Amara shouted, her voice cracking. "Ethan, no, no, no." The room exploded with panic. Someone screamed. A man dropped his cup, the crash echoing across the cafe. But Amara didn't hear any of it. Her entire world had narrowed to the small, lifeless body lying before her. She quickly laid Ethan flat on the ground, pressing her ear to his chest. No movement. No heartbeat. No sound. Her stomach turned to ice. "Call 911, she shouted again, louder this time. "Tell them it's a child. He's not breathing." A woman near the counter, shaking, grabbed her phone. "I'm calling. Oh God, hurry." Amara tilted Ethan's head back, her mind flashing through her old first aid training. Check the airway. Clear it. Breathe. Her hands worked automatically, though tears blurred her vision. She swept his mouth gently with her fingers, making sure nothing was blocking his throat. Then, taking a deep breath, she sealed her lips over his and gave him 2 rescue breaths. "Come on, baby." "Come on," she whispered between breaths. She pressed her palms against his small chest, interlocking her fingers the way she'd been taught years ago in church first aid training. She began CPR, 1, 2, 3, 4, her voice counting in broken sobs. Charles knelt beside her, shaking uncontrollably, completely powerless. "Please, please do something." "Save him." "I'm trying," she gasped. "He's not responding yet." She pressed harder, praying with every push. Her arms burned, but she didn't stop. "Come on, Ethan, breathe for me, baby. Please breathe." The cafe workers stood frozen, tears in their eyes, watching the young waitress they saw every day fight to save a billionaire's child on the cold tile floor. 1 minute felt like an hour. Every second stretched, suffocating in silence. Then suddenly, Ethan's chest jerked. A faint cough escaped his lips. Amara froze mid-press, hope flooding her veins. "That's it. Come on, sweetheart, breathe. You can do it." She turned him slightly to his side as he coughed again, this time stronger, sputtering for air. His small chest rose and fell erratically, but it moved. "He's breathing," someone cried out. Charles let out a broken sound, half sob, half prayer, as tears streamed down his face. "Thank God. Oh, thank God." Amara checked his pulse again, weak but steady. Relief hit her like a wave, but she stayed focused. She cradled his head gently, whispering, "You're okay now. You're safe." When the paramedics finally burst through the door minutes later, the entire cafe exhaled as if it had been holding its breath the whole time. "Over here," Amara shouted, waving them down. 2 EMTs rushed to her side, instantly assessing the boy. One knelt and took over the breathing mask, while the other started checking his vitals. "What happened?" one asked briskly. "Possible allergic reaction," Amara explained, her voice shaking but clear. "He had orange juice earlier." His breathing stopped. He collapsed. "I started CPR," the medic nodded quickly. "You did good. You saved him." Amara finally sat back, exhausted, her hands trembling as adrenaline faded. She felt like her heart had been wrung dry. Charles reached for his son's hand as they placed an oxygen mask over Ethan's face. "I'm here, buddy. I'm here," he whispered, voice breaking. Then he looked up at Amara, truly seeing her for the first time. The girl he had dismissed, the one he had called just a waitress. Now she was the reason his son was alive. "Miss," his voice faltered. I don't know what to say." Amara shook her head, her eyes glistening. "You don't need to say anything, sir. Just stay with him." As the paramedics lifted Ethan onto the stretcher, the boy's small hand reached out weakly, and Amara instinctively took it, squeezing gently. His lips moved beneath the oxygen mask. "Thank you," he whispered faintly before closing his eyes again. Tears spilled down Amara's cheeks. She watched as they wheeled him out into the flashing red and blue lights waiting outside. And as the doors of the ambulance shut, she felt her knees give way. She sat on the floor surrounded by silence, her apron soaked with sweat and tears. For a long moment no one spoke. Then slowly, the customers began to clap. Softly at first, then louder, until the cafe filled with the sound of applause and gratitude, but Amara barely heard it. She was staring at the door where Ethan had been taken, whispering a silent prayer, because deep down, she knew this wasn't over yet. The boy was alive for now, but something told her this day would change all of their lives forever. The sound of sirens cut through the city air like a scream. Red and blue lights painted the walls of the cafe as paramedics wheeled Ethan out on a stretcher. The boy's small body looked even tinier under the white sheets, his face pale but breathing again, shallow and steady. Charles Whitmore followed close behind, his once impeccable suit rumpled, his face streaked with tears. The same man who was used to commanding boardrooms and controlling millions now looked completely helpless. His phone was forgotten in his pocket. His power meant nothing in this moment. Amara trailed beside them, her apron stained and hands trembling. She didn't care about her shift or her boss yelling in the background. All she cared about was the fragile boy fighting for every breath. When the back doors of the ambulance opened, the paramedic turned to Charles. "Sir, we're tight on space. Only one can ride with the patient." Charles opened his mouth to speak, but before he could, another medic interrupted, glancing at Amara. "She should come. She knows what happened. Her quick action saved him. We'll need her to explain the situation." Charles froze for a moment, then nodded wordlessly. Amara climbed in beside Ethan, taking his hand gently as the doors slammed shut behind them. The siren wailed again and the ambulance sped into the traffic, leaving behind the cafe, the chaos and the whispers. Inside, the air was heavy with urgency. The paramedics worked fast, one checking oxygen levels, another adjusting the IV. Machines beeped in a rhythm that made Amara's heart clench every time it faltered. She squeezed Ethan's hand, whispering softly, "You're doing great, sweetheart. You're so brave." Ethan's eyes flickered open for a brief second, and he looked at her, confused and weak. "It hurts." "I know," she said gently. "But you're safe now. You just keep breathing, okay?" Charles sat across from them, knees bouncing uncontrollably. For the first time, he didn't know what to do or say. The woman sitting in front of him, the waitress he had dismissed so easily, was now the only calm presence in the storm. He finally spoke, his voice raw. "How did you know what to do?" Amara looked up, still holding Ethan's hand. "My little brother," she said softly. "He had an allergic reaction once, just like this. I thought I was going to lose him." I recognized the signs. Charles stared at her, his throat tightening. He couldn't remember the last time he'd really looked at someone like this, really listened. "So you just jumped in? Without thinking?" he asked quietly. Amara nodded. "There wasn't time to think. When a child can't breathe, you just move." The paramedic beside them interjected, "She saved his life, sir. A few more minutes without air and he might not have made it." Charles's eyes glistened. He turned to his son again, guilt weighing on his face like stone. "I didn't even notice," he whispered. "I was sitting right there, and I didn't even see him." Amara didn't respond. She just kept rubbing Ethan's hand, her voice soft but steady. "He's okay now, that's what matters." But inside, those words pierced her too. She had grown up watching people like Charles, people with everything, who rarely noticed those around them. She had spent years serving their coffee, clearing their tables, listening to their conversations about money and power. Yet here, in this cramped ambulance, the difference between rich and poor vanished. They were just two people praying for a little boy to live. Ethan began coughing again, weak but alive. The paramedics adjusted his mask. "We're almost there," one shouted over the noise of the siren. Charles leaned forward, his hand trembling as he reached for his son's foot beneath the blanket. "Hang on, buddy," he whispered. "Daddy's right here." The ambulance turned sharply, and for a brief moment, their eyes met, Amara's and Charles's. His were filled with remorse, hers with compassion. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but something inside him shifted. When they finally pulled into the hospital driveway, nurses and doctors were already waiting. The back doors swung open to a rush of white coats and shouting voices. Ethan was lifted out quickly, disappearing behind sliding glass doors. Charles jumped out and turned back to Amara, still inside the ambulance. For a second, he didn't know what to say. Words seemed too small. "You're coming in," he said suddenly. "Please." Amara hesitated. "Sir, I think it's better if—" "No," he interrupted, voice firm but trembling. "You saved his life. I need you there." She followed him through the hospital corridors, the fluorescent lights flashing across her face. Every beep of the machines made her heart ache. They stopped outside the emergency room where Ethan was taken. Charles pressed a hand against the glass, staring at his son surrounded by doctors. "He's so small," he murmured, voice breaking. "I was so busy I didn't even realize how sick he looked. I didn't even notice the signs. What kind of father am I?" Amara placed a gentle hand on his arm. "You're a father who got a second chance," she said softly. "That's what matters now." He turned toward her, tears filling his eyes. "And you're the reason I still have one." In that sterile hallway under the humming fluorescent lights, something powerful passed between them. Not romance, not gratitude alone, but a deep, human connection. A billionaire who had forgotten how to see people, and a waitress whose heart refused not to care. That moment marked the beginning of a transformation neither of them could have predicted.